Anhedonia, an inability to experience pleasure. Did you know Annie Hall was originally called anhedonia? Albie Singer, Woody Allen's character, lacks the capacity to experience anything in life as good or positive. At 28 or 29, I am diagnosed with that. Granted, I am not experiencing much pleasure at this particular time in my life, but I doubt it's caused by something you can label like that, something psychiatric sounding. It seems more like what I'd read on an insurance form when I had a job at Blue Cross Blue Shield during college. Feelings of impending doom. That's what some 19-year-old girl had written in the diagnosis slot. The circles she drew instead of dots over her eyes made it pretty clear it was the patient and not the mental health provider who'd filled out the form. Yeah, I think I've got that, feelings of impending doom. I'm a few years out of my first marriage, and instead of choosing men who lack my ex-husband's chauvinism and narcissism, I'm going out with men who are worse in all those ways. Very smart. I'm not making much progress in my career because I'm behaving as if finding, saving, and fixing wayward men is my true livelihood. So, am I having a shitty time in my life because of a diagnosable condition, or because I keep making shitty choices? There it is on the form my therapist has to fill out, anhedonia. Well, I figure she has to put something so I can get reimbursed. When the number of sessions I'm allotted on my insurance plan runs out, I stop going to therapy. A couple years later, next crisis, I'm going through another breakup. It's as if my entire 30s I live between breakups, although it's hard to call them that because the men I date are so unavailable, none of them want to make our relationships official. For instance, when I'm living with one guy, he calls the local bike shop and says, "My friend is coming to pick up her bike." Wouldn't want the girl answering the phone at the bike shop to know he's taken. It's 1996, and this breakup, or whatever it's called, hits me harder than most. It's almost as hard as the period before I got the courage to end my marriage, and I wouldn't leave the house or bathe for 3 weeks. Once again, I'm having trouble getting out of bed and going outside of my apartment for anything other than to walk my sister's ADHD Cocker Spaniel. Fuck that dog. Thank God for that dog. In addition to man trouble, of course, once again, I'm having career trouble. A book I'd been ghostwriting for a famous designer hasn't worked out, and the author is trying to screw me. 2 years later, I will take her to court and win. But in 1996, I am too paralyzed with misery to even consider that a possibility. When it gets so bad that I scare myself, I do the usual. I pore over the list of mental health providers in the insurance booklet, trying to find one not too far from my apartment. Oh, look, there's one 3 blocks away on 16th Street. Perfect. This therapist gives me a new diagnosis. I have graduated from anhedonia to anxiety/depression. She suggests that in addition to our treatment, I also seek pharmacological help from a psychiatrist. And so begin my 2 years on Zoloft in increasing dosages, during which I often feel as if my head is floating above my body like a balloon. Not necessarily in a bad way. It takes the edge off the depression. I also have little to no interest in sex, which is useful since I could use a break from my unique and fucked up version of the mating dance. 1998, a different kind of health crisis, a digestive one, brings me to a holistic MD who wants me to clean house. I need to do an elimination diet and get off any medications. This is fine with me because I am not happy about the increased dosage of Zoloft every few months. I mean, am I supposed to be on this shit the rest of my life? Spring 2000, next crisis, aka the next big breakup. 2 short days after I have moved out of Bill's, I am on a date at Angelica Kitchen because that's what you do when you're a bad relationship addict and you've just ended one that lasted 3 years. I'm talking to my date about how I feel, like I just need to get out of Dodge for a while. I'm going through something, and I might illegally sublet my East Village apartment for the summer and take a room in Rhinebeck, except the room I've lined up is not available anymore. The gentleman at the next table interrupts. I'm sorry, I couldn't help but overhear that you're looking for a room to rent in Rhinebeck. I have a friend who might have one. Can I give you her number? He writes the number on the back of his business card and gives it to me. The next day, once again, I'm going down the list of Aetna mental health providers in my general Manhattan vicinity. I'm crying to one and then another. I'm going through a breakup! None of them have any openings. I've got the phone receiver in one hand, and with the other, I am mindlessly flipping over and over the business card from the man at the next table at Angelica the last night. After the last therapist on the Aetna list gives me no hope, I put the phone down, and I let the card drop. It lands not on the back side where he'd written the Rhinebeck lady's phone number, but on the front. Ryan Kean, CSW. Hi, I met you last night at Angelica Kitchen. Do you take Aetna? I'm going through a breakup! He doesn't take Aetna. Click. But then he calls me back. Are you willing to really work? Because if you are, I'll cut you a deal. I begin treatment with him, and I tell him about not being so functional. Should I be going back on Zoloft? Please say no. He tells me he's not much for psychopharmaceuticals. He feels they're overprescribed. He'd rather see me lift myself up through taking positive action, through better life choices, and through being physically active. Did you know that half an hour of exercise can have the same effect as the average dose of Zoloft? I didn't. I make tremendous progress with this therapist. I'm not cured of what ails me so much as I'm able to see so much of what ails me and some of my really misguided thinking. Seeing the misguided thinking, while that in and of itself can be depressing, leads me to better thinking and to better choices. Suddenly, it's not so hard to get out of bed in the morning. Hey, maybe I never had depression in the first place. Maybe it was just my thinking, or a hormone imbalance, or maybe it was my Mercury fillings. I have a lot of fillings. Or could it have been my Saturn return? My shrink gets me to sign up for online dating. One of the first men I go out with is a shrink himself. You're definitely a Yavis patient, he says, sizing me up in a tone that sounds complimentary. After our date, I Google and learn that Yavis is an acronym for Young, Attractive, Verbal, Intelligent, and Successful. What a passive-aggressive way for my date to tell me he thinks I'm pretty. From anhedonia to anxiety/depression to now this, Yavis. Which am I? Am I any of these? What is in a diagnosis? Is a diagnosis static? Is depression situational or chemical? Is it hereditary? Do you get it from your family through your blood or by way of exposure? Now my life is going pretty well. I score high marks for good choices in terms of my mate, where I live, the work I'm lucky enough to get to do. But there are old things that gnaw at me. I don't know how to begin to heal my difficult relationship with my father. When things flare up between us, I'm reluctant to deal with him directly for fear of him hurting me, and for fear of hurting him, and for fear of him hurting me back. I find myself in limbo, and the effect is paralyzing. It's hard to be real in the rest of my life and in my writing when I try to maintain this falseness. And shit, here comes that dreaded old feeling of impending doom, or anhedonia, or anxiety/depression, or whatever the hell you want to call it. The positive choices and vigorous endorphin-boosting hikes haven't quite been cutting it these days. I'm reluctant to try Zoloft or another antidepressant again. I have a really nice husband, and while perimenopause is already wreaking havoc on, shall we say, a certain aspect of our life. Then, in the dead of the dark of winter, it becomes hard to get up again in the morning. I cave and ask my doctor for something. She gives me a prescription for Wellbutrin. I can't say it exactly cures my depression, but I can tell you it cures, well, shall we say, certain aspects of perimenopause.